This program, Words Like Freedom, will feature Honorée Fannone Jeffers, author of The Age of Phillis and Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, June 19th, 1:15 p.m. Available for purchase online from the Schomburg shop at schomburgshop.com are today's featured books, The Age of Phillis and Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third annual Schomburg Literary Festival. I want to say hello, hope you're enjoying your afternoon, and I also want to wish you a happy Juneteenth. It is a wonderful day of the celebration of freedom, and how better to celebrate freedom than to have the pleasure of being in conversation with one of the esteemed authors from our cultural community. My name is Joy Bivins, and I have the distinct pleasure of serving as the Associate Director of Collections and Research Services at the Schomburg Center. But on June 21, this coming Monday, I will elatedly begin my role as Director of the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. And this is particularly exciting today as we have this conversation and are in having this conversation with the wonderful Professor Honorée Fannone Jeffers, who is the author of The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, as well as The Age of Phillis, which are two books that we will be in discussion about today. I want to take this moment and just welcome you and let you know that the books can be purchased using the link below or by going to schomburgshop.com. I want to thank our ASL interpreter and live captioner for joining us today. If you have questions for Honorée, we will be glad to answer them. Please send them anytime in the chat. And then to find out about the rest of the Schomburg Literary Festival, events happening today, please go to schomburgcenterlitfest.org. So, as I mentioned, I am happy today to be joined by Honorée Fannone Jeffers, who is the author of 4 critically acclaimed books, including The Gospel of Barbecue, which a title I really love, Outlandish Blues, Red Clay Sweet, and The Glory Gets. She is both a prose writer and award-winning poet. Her essays and fiction stories have appeared in Black Renaissance, Noir, Callaloo, Commonplace, the Interactive Journal of Early American Life, Indiana Review, among other scholarly quarterlies and journals, pardon me. Today, we will be discussing 2 of her works, as I mentioned, The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois and The Age of Phillis. And while Professor Jeffers has won many, many awards, she wanted me to mention the one that she is most proud of, and that is the 2020 NAACP Image Award for Literary Work in Poetry. So join me in welcoming Professor Jeffers. And how we'd like to start this program today is by having Professor Jeffers read directly from her new work, which I will hold up here, The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, which will be released to the public July 27, 2021. So Professor Jeffers, please thrill us with your new work.
I just want to say I am just so thrilled and honored to be here at the esteemed Schomburg. This has been a dream of mine for a really long time, so thank you so much for inviting me. I'm going to read from one of the historical portions of the Love Songs of W.B. Du Bois. This is from the 3rd song of the book, and this is called The Loss of Africa. We know of those taken from the place called Africa, captured by men who had transgressed against flesh for a long tortured time. The Africans who stole others and kept those folks for themselves. The Africans who stole others and sold those to the Europeans who would take them over the water and humiliate and sometimes torture them for life. We know about the dark, dark folks who never would see home again. We know dates. We know hours. We know disbelief. We know mourning. We know about the years even before 1619 and the years that would come after. We know about those Africans who arrived in a place that the English called Jamestown, Virginia. We know which villages these Africans lived in before they were stolen, their collection of conical, huddled homes, domestic birds running on the ground of a courtyard, feathers of black and red, a goat tied to the side of a hut, and every morning a mother rising from her pallet, tossing grains in a pestle. And we try not to weep over what was lost to these folks. We know about an enemy from a neighboring village. We know of strangers who saw wealth in meat rocking bone. The names of the captives are lost to everyone but us, their tribes, their children if they had one, their beloveds they'd hoped to marry, and ceremonies of laughter and wine. The rivers passing through their nations, their words for a rooster cock crowing, for a delectable fruit, skin the color of red intruding yellow, for their warbles and ticks of joy. On that English ship that would land in Jamestown, the enslaved probably weren't locked in irons. That time would come later, after the sailors saw the Africans look at water and sing, leap overboard, and the sharks swim to meet them. These 20 and odd folks would begin as bloody vectors, spilling lines across continents. More Africans enslaved by the English would arrive on ships. You already know that we know laws as well. We know 1662 and the words set down in the Virginia colony, partis sequitur ventrum, Latin for that which is brought forth from the belly. And so African, now Negro women's children would no longer follow the status of their fathers as had been English common law for centuries. Following a father's status was for white children. With dark children, their mothers would decide their fate. If a woman was enslaved, her children would be enslaved. If a woman was free, her children would be free. And if enslaved, somehow a mother would try to hold on to her child, to keep her child from being sold. And if separated, her child would forever grieve. This is what happened to girls from across the water, girls whose lines would become tangled with our people who lived here on the western side of that ocean.
Thank you so much, Professor Jeffers, for that reading. I want to start with a question that is directly related to the theme of the Literary Fest and also what you have hinted to in this reading, and that is freedom and liberation and what it means to write about the past and what it means to read about the past and what are the possibilities, the liberatory possibilities of both writing and reading about these sacred moments in our past.
Well, I think, before we came to this moment, or I'd say 2020, you'd hear a lot of young folks and sometimes older folks who would say, I'm tired of hearing about slavery. They weren't tired of asking about reparations, but they were saying, they were tired of hearing about slavery. But for those of us who do this kind of work, whether it's, scholars, literary scholars, historians, novelists, poets, we tend these altars because to quote from the great Maya Angelou, we're the hope and the dream of the slave.
Right.
And so for me, it's important for me to tend their altars in this particular way, because they lived to push the generations forward. They lived so we could be here doing this work. And so, for me, it's important not only to embrace my freedom, but to embrace joy, because that was their wish. Those were their prayers for us, even for these children that they could not see in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I want to start and kind of continue that a little bit, because you exercise great freedom, and obviously your writing demonstrates great joy, but you move between these genres quite freely. And I want to talk about how, what it's like in your process to move between poetry and prose. Do you see any distinct lines there, or do you approach it differently as an author?
Well, I always let people know, there's rarely a moment whenever I'm talking about writing that I don't mention my mentor, my friend, my second mother, Lucille Clifton, the great Lucille Clifton, and who I called Miss Lucille, because I'm from the Deep South. And Miss Lucille always would say, be open to the word. Always be open to the word. Don't worry about where the word is going to go, right? Just be open to it. And so one of the things that happens is I never know when, an idea or the word comes to me, right? Like a lot of times things come to me in dreams, and I wake up and I write them down, and I never know what this is going to be until I begin to work on craft. So as I tell my students, the first draft is for you. That's the moment of ecstasy, right? That's the moment of the most joy. It's like falling in love, and then the least joy is when you begin to try to, impose the craft. But now that I'm at this point in my life, right? I have 5 books of poetry, and the novel is my 6th book. I know sort of where I'm going, but there's still that surprise. And so, but I think that the thing that my my poetry and my fiction share is that I'm always concerned in some form with history.
Okay.
Whether it's family history, whether it's public history, right? Whether it's the crossroads, as I call them, whether it's public or private, I know that that's my duty and my charge now. But you want to keep it fresh. You don't want to keep going back over the same thing. So there are different ways, and also I know that I'm always going to write about Black women.
Right.
Even when I write about men, I'm writing about women. Because the men love women, So, there's a character in the book, Uncle Ruth, and Uncle Ruth, I didn't know people were just going to love Uncle Ruth so much, but Uncle Ruth loves women. And he really is, someone that, when I wrote Uncle Ruth, I wanted to write someone. Of course, I could never approach the great Toni Morrison, but I wanted to write somebody that reminded me of Paul D.
Okay.
Beloved. I love me some Paul D. And I wanted to write a man that was vulnerable, and that even as he was, trying to be macho sometimes, he still deferred to women.
I see. So, and that brings us to the Love Songs book, and wanting to know, I asked about kind of the shift between poetry and prose, but why did you want to write such a
A chubby book.
voluminous.
It's
You
real
called it
chubby. It's real
Um,
chubby, Joy. Well, listen now. The book originally was only supposed to be 450 pages.
Okay.
And I felt like that was a long book.
Okay.
And there were some people who had read the book and they had said, not my agent, because she just loves all. She loves all up on me. I love all up on her. We love each other. She's been my agent since 2005.
Okay.
But there were some people who read the book and they said, this is two different books, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's two different books. Why don't you do that? And I said, well, everybody does that. You know, very few people look at, you know, the connection between the present and the past. There are some people who have done it and done it really well, right? Mm-hmm. But I wanted that. I wanted to show the residue of slavery,
right.
And the resistance of the women, right? As we move towards, you know, Ailey, right?
Right.
But so when the novel was sold, it was 450 pages, and I thought I was just gonna, you know, hone it, you know. And my editor, the great Aaron Wicks at Harper, I always say Aaron Wicks is a genius, and the world needs to know. Aaron said, okay, well, here are my thoughts, you know, and you go on and you write however much you want to, and then we'll cut. And I said, well, I'm a little scared, Aaron. You know, this book is already real big. She said, oh, we're going to cut it down. Don't even worry about it. So I said, okay. So I wrote about 300 more pages in a year.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was, you know, coming up on the end of the semester in 2019. And then I had sabbatical in that fall. And then, you know, my students come first. So when I came off of sabbatical, I was, you know, to quote Sterling A. Brown, I was inching along like a inchworm, you know, trying to get in, you know, my little hour a day or whatever. So I turn it back into her, and we have been talking constantly, and I didn't hear back from her. So I'm scared, you know, I'm scared she's, you know, going to think this is a horrible book and So I'm texting her, and I said, well, you know, I've got some ideas about sections that I can take out, you know, because I know this is too long. And she didn't say anything. So then she came back around. And I finally, you know, I just couldn't hold it in any longer. And I said, you know, Aaron, listen now, you know, I need to know, I need to emotionally prepare what we're going to take out. She said, oh, we're not taking out any of this. She said, this is beautiful. This is a magisterial epic. I'm like, whoa. Hold on a minute. No. And I mean, I'm serious. I was like, no, Aaron, nobody's going to buy, you know, a really big book. She said, oh, yes, they are. They're going to buy this book. And I said, I don't understand. She said, you just wait. So then we went through line edits, and I added another 50 pages. And then we began to really cut the fat off. Mm-hmm. So there's no fat on the book, even though it's a big book. But I think that when people think of, you know, women's literature, they think of, you know, something smaller. You know, men are supposed to write the epics. Right. The women are supposed to write, you know, about kitchen table things. And that's what I wanted. I wanted a kitchen table epic. I wanted a book that focused on women's internal lives, but that we would see America writ large in the lives of Black women. And I was real scared, you know, I mean, I'm sounding very confident now, but I was scared. I was real scared. Then that first Star review came out from Publishers Weekly. Mm-hmm. And then I got a star review from Kirkus. I still can't believe that, because Kirkus will drag you. Kirkus will drag you for filth. Okay. And then I got the star review from Booklist. And it's only when that happened, so that's maybe been 2 or 3 weeks ago, that I allowed myself to get excited about it. And then the Black Bookstagrammers on Instagram, the Black women, they got behind me.
Right, right. Well, I do want to talk about something that we kind of mentioned in our before talk, and that is the Blackness of this book, the signifiers, the symbols, the language, where it's very specific, and intentionally so, and how writing that into this book, what you were trying to express to your audience about the nature of Black life, or about the specificity of Black life.
Well, I think that I wish I could remember this man's name. I got a fan letter once about my poetry, and the man said that I moved expertly from the highbrow to the quotidian. And that's what I wanted. Because this is what I know.
Right.
Parents are college professors. My father was a Black Arts Movement poet. My mother has a doctorate, you know. She and my 2 sisters went to Spelman College. I'm the black sheep of the family. I didn't go to Spelman. There's a reason for that. I'm a high school dropout. So, you know, that's why I couldn't go to Spelman. I wanted to go to Spelman real bad, but they were like, we need to see that high school diploma or that GED. And I didn't want to do either because I was bad. So
now that's something we might have to talk about.
Oh yeah, hopefully one day, Joy, we'll see each other in person, and I'll tell you the whole little story.
Okay.
So, but I grew up with very wise old Black people in the South. Okay.
Right.
And I wanted to show the wisdom, you know, because there have been times in, you know, racially microaggressive academia where people have challenged my intellect because I have a deep Southern accent and, you know, all of that. And I wanted to show the brilliance of my people, of my Southern Black people. That was very important to me. And I wanted, this is, you know, there's a reason there's the love songs. It's not just of the boys, but it's a love song to Black women.
Right, right.
You know, I love us.
Right,
you know, we love each other. We're generous, you know, and I wanted us to see ourselves in all our complexity.
Well, that is something that is a through line from that love of Black women from this book to your earlier poetry book, with The Age of Phillis, which I would love to hear something. I know all of us would love to hear you read from that. So if you could, we will move to that and continue to discuss both of them. But it would be great to hear from you.
All righty. I'm gonna read 2 poems from The Age of Phillis. And one is from the point of view of Yai, which means mother in the Wolof language of the Senegambia region. And the other is the title poem. There's an epigraph to this poem from Langston Hughes. This is a song for the genius child. Sing it softly, for the song is wild. Langston Hughes from Genius Child. An issue of mercy, number 1. Mercy, girl. What the mother might have said, pointing at the sun rising, what makes life possible, then dripped the bowl of water reverent into oblivious earth. Was this prayer for her? Respect for the dead, or disappeared and act to please a genius child? Her daughter would speak of water, bowl, sun, light arriving, light gone, sometime after the nice white lady paid and named her for the slave ship. Mercy. What the child called Phyllis would claim after that sea journey. Let's call it that. Let's lie to each other. Not early descent into madness, naked travail among filth and rats. What got Phyllis over that sea? What kept a stolen daughter? Perhaps it was mercy, dear reader. Mercy, dear brethren. Water, bowl, sun, a mothering, God's milky sound, morning shards, and a mother wondered if her daughter forgot her real name, refused to envision the rest. Baby teeth missing, and somebody wrapping her treasure barely in a dirty carpet. 'Twas mercy. You know the story. How we've lied to each other. The Age of Phillis. How old was the child when she first laughed in her master's kitchen? She shouldn't have been eating at the table with the whites, but Susanna Wheatley might have flouted custom. Her woman's heart soft, tender, unboiled meat. When the child was very small, Susanna might have brought her into the dining room, sat her on a stool, placed plain crockery on the child's lap, engaged with her in English, a caged music, but soon that would end. The child was enslaved. She'd need to learn of sin, of Cain. What was the time when she answered to her new name? She would have stopped saying those syllables in her own language. My yai didn't call me that. Enough punishments, but hopefully no whippings would have broken her boldness, the kissing of teeth in imitation of her nation. When did she learn that white women take care in this world, but Black women walk barefoot on glass? And what was the age of Phyllis? When she stopped turning east, thinking of water and faithful bowls, of her parents, of love only ending in death. There is no such age. There never will be, though a sister's mouth might tell you lies.
Thank you. Thank you so much for reading from that. And I think we have a little bit of a wait here before the screen changes. Yes. Thank you for reading from The Age of Phillis. And I've listened to some of your interviews about writing this book and the work that the archives you engaged. And I want to talk a little bit about why it was important to make Phyllis Wheatley more than that Black History Month character that you so lovingly talked about, that was part of your childhood, what the filling the flesh out on this woman meant to you, and what that means to our understanding of not just her experience, but the experience of Black people in slavery.
Well, I think one of the things that I have noticed is that there are many scholars of Phyllis Wheatley Peters, as I call her, because she took the last name of her husband as an act of agency.
Yes.
But I noticed that people erased her parents.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they did that on purpose. I don't ever think that somebody rubs their hands together and says, you know, we're just going to erase Black people from this narrative. But I think that what happened was that Susanna Wheatley took center stage in this
Right.
Black woman's, you know, life. And
Right.
that was very concerning to me. First of
Right.
all, Susanna Wheatley was not her mom. People want to place her in a mother's role. And although I definitely don't ever want to throw Susanna Wheatley under the bus, as I've said to people, we need to stop talking about Susanna Wheatley was extraordinary for being kind to this little Black girl.
Right.
Every child is born with a birthright of love and care. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Black children, white children, any child is supposed to be loved. That's what you're supposed to do. So nobody should be patted on their back for loving a child. Okay, that's what they were supposed to do. But I think also when people talk about Susanna Wheatley, they never talk about if they were so kind, why didn't they find a Black family to raise this little girl,
Mm-hmm.
right? Why would they name her for a slave ship, which is the vessel of her trauma, right?
Right.
So I think for me, because I have spent so much of my life, you know, studying, you know, being a student, you know, sometimes I call myself a scholar, but being a student of Black history, there were things that to me were obvious, and I was shocked they weren't obvious to other people.
Right.
Right. The notion of her parents, who were her parents. She talks about her parents in a poem that's written to the Earl of Dartmouth. You know, when she writes, "I young in life, by seeming cruel fate, was snatched from Afrique's fancied happy seat. What pangs excruciating must molest? What sorrows labor in my parents' breast?"
Mm-hmm.
So, but all we know is that one point, right, on being brought from Africa to America, where she says, "'Twas mercy brought me from my pagan land." And that's concerning to us as contemporary Black people, because it seems like what she's saying is, thank you, white folks, I'm so happy to be a slave, right? But there has been one particular scholar of the last name Lavernier, who wrote an essay called Stylist Protest in Phyllis Wheatley's poetry, where he talks about there are clues that she is making fun of someone.
Mm-hmm.
Pagan is in italics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. When we get to that line, their color is a diabolic dye. It's in third person and it's in quotation marks.
Right. Right.
Okay. So she's quoting someone who said that to her, right? But the thing about it is that you have to take the time with her work. And we as contemporary people don't want to take that time. And so one of the things that I've learned from scholars, you know, as a poet, is that sometimes you have to sit with people. You know, you can't just dash off stuff. You know, for example, Jennifer L. Morgan's book just came out. I guess it was yesterday, day before yesterday. I ordered it in Kindle and I ordered it in hardcover because I love myself. I stand for some Jennifer L. Morgan. She is brilliant. Her work is, and she talks about in the, you know, introduction, how this took her a very long time, right? And so sometimes, like, I have always been curious as to why I am the first person on record who noticed there was a ring in Miss Phyllis's nose, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you magnify that engraving, which is the only picture that we have of her, you will see it right there, right? So there are all of these sort of things, right? So I couldn't have done this, written this book without scholars, but I also did my own scholarship, right? And I think that's important. But I also think that the reason that I did this, I spent, 15 years in the archives, is because I'm devoted to her.
Right.
And I think that, like I just mentioned, Jennifer L. Morgan, you can tell when somebody's devoted to their subject matter. You can tell when there's passion, right? And I think that for some folks, there is passion. When you look at Catherine Clay Bassard's work, Spiritual Interrogations, for example, it's clear that she is devoted to Black women. When you look at Cedric May's work, when you look at Derek Spire's work, there are all of these sort of, when you look at the white scholar Marcus Rediker, who wrote The Slave Ship, A Human History, right, and helped to put, the slave ship database together. These people are devoted, but some other people are only interested in Phyllis Wheatley and her relationship with white people.
Got it. So, yeah. Well, another aspect of this book you talked about, there's the historic, the contemporary. I found it both troubling and useful that you brought in the detention of children at the border, because that is kind of our modern way of coming to terms with what that experience might have been for people who were coming from the continent. And did you have a particular, that device, did you want to use it for it to be read in a particular way?
I wanted us to understand what those children were going through.
Right.
I think about them all the time.
Right.
And I wanted us to understand that you can't do this to little bitty kids. It's
right.
bad enough when you do it to adults, but you can't do this to little bitty kids. And I wanted people to understand that we have this attitude in this country, like, well, some of us do, like we're over things, but we're not, right? I wanted people to, I think sometimes it's really easy for people when they read history, because they're like, that was then, this is now, right? But they don't understand, not only when we're talking about slavery, Black people, we carry that with us. We carry it. There is a spiritual archive as well as a documentary archive. And in our spirits, we have archived this, that we don't know the names, but we feel them constantly.
Right.
And so when people, talk about, well, slavery was in the past, and then you begin to see these sort of things that are still popping up. So I went back and forth because I didn't want to use those children. Right. But I wanted people to see this and not look away.
Correct. And it's interesting that we don't have names that we're associating with these children. Correct.
No, that's one of the reasons I did the found poem, because they mention the little bitty kids' names in one of the found poems, but in the other they just say, these children, da 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 da. And I wondered also how people in the 18th century could see these things happen and look away. Right? We look away constantly. And so I wanted I wanted people, because there are moments where I, flex as a poet, right? See me move here. I do that because, people want constant innovation.
Right.
I don't really feel like I need to do that. My mentor, Lucille Clifton, she wrote in one particular way, and it was like the Bible. There is a Lucille Clifton poem for every moment that you have ever encountered, okay? But people now, they want you to be doing this. So I would say, okay, let me do this. Let me flex, right? Let me show you, watch me work. But then there are other poems, like the very long one that catalogs about the Zong massacre, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Just very straightforward. This is what's happening. Slavery was in the Bible. We have U.S. presidents that owned, enslaved individuals. This is the horror that we had. This is what they did to these people. And what I do is I just put it across the page in case somebody needs to see the line breaks. This is fine. But it's really an essay. It's really an essay in verse about what we want slavery to have been. When people talk about Juneteenth, I think it's very important, but I think people also need to know that in the Deep South, there were, they would just pick up Black men off the street for loitering, right? And then rent them out.
Yes.
I'm from, as I say, I'm from the dirty. Okay. So I remember I dated a guy who had been in juvenile detention, and he talked about how they would rent them out to wealthy white farmers to pick their potatoes and do those sort of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think the history of certain cities in the South is very much intertwined with what you're just talking about, that convict leasing,
Yes.
and it is something that, yes, formal slavery ended, but slavery continued, right?
Slavery continued, and we have to understand that. And I think one of the reasons that you have a lot of people now, mostly white, I mean, you have a few Black folks where I'm just like, who raised you? Why are you saying these things? Why were you at the Capitol, breaking in on January the 6th? I'm just kind of flabbergasted. But I think one of the reasons that you have it, I'm always trying to look at humanity.
Right.
Okay, even when I'm upset about something. But you have people where the reason they're upset about it is because you want to have these glorious stories about your nation.
Right.
It's the same thing with, my family. I remember I went someplace and I was supposed to do a reading, and my cousins showed up to the lunch and they were talking about how great our family was. And I said, yes, but what about that child molester that they used to get invited to the family reunion, and then they didn't show up to the reading, right? Because I'm the truth teller in the family. And so, I think that's the thing. You can have a wonderful family, and you can also have some problems, right, in the family, and those two realities can exist at the same time.
And they always do.
And they always do. They always do.
They always do. One of the things I want to go back to, we don't have any questions in the chat yet, but if you have questions, please do put them there and we will address them, is something you said earlier, and that had to do with you naming Phyllis Wheatley Peters by her married name. Yes. And we know that this is very important within our communities, right? The Miss, the Mrs, the so on and so forth. And that kind of comes up again in the love songs as well. These salutations
Yeah.
or connections to an experience that is not about your oppression or how someone else
Yes.
sees you, but about all of these other identities that one might have. So can you talk a little bit about renaming Phyllis Wheatley? Maybe in the future we'll call her by her full married name, and how important that was to you.
Well, there are some scholars that have now begun to
Good.
refer to her as Phyllis Wheatley Peters. I think one of the biggest problems with the scholarship, and one of the reasons that I think that I was chosen, right, you know, to write the book, right? I always feel like some things are put upon you spiritually, is that the Odell memoir, right? I always go Odell because we're not sure that Odell wrote it. We do now have after 10 years of my asking for it, we do now have a scholar that has provided the genealogy that links Margaretta Matilda Odell to Susanna Wheatley. But as I always say to people, I know very few Black women now who tell white women the inside business of their marriages and their relationships. I'm not really sure that I believe that Phyllis Wheatley Peters was going around telling people her man was mean to her or whatever, right? But the thing about it is that Margaretta Matilda Odell was born after Miss Phyllis passed away.
Right, right.
So that is very problematic. And that is the reason that we call her Phyllis Wheatley, is because in the Odell memoir, whoever wrote it says that Miss Phyllis did not take her husband's last name.
I got it. I got it. So I am getting a wrap.
Me too.
In the chat. And so before we do that, I just want to thank you. I've enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, thank you so much, Ms. Joy.
And a great way to spend Juneteenth holiday, and also to talk about these very important texts that will become part of our historic cultural legacy. So thank you for joining us today, Professor Jeffers.
It's been my pleasure.
Remember that there are still Schomburg Literary Festival events following this, so please do attend. If you need to know, schomburglitfest.org, and you can find all that information there. If you want to purchase these books, which you should, schomburgshop.org as well, and make sure that you purchase from the link below. So thank you for joining us today. Happy Juneteenth, and enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Thank you so much.